Welcome back to WoW Unfiltered, a WoW podcast where we talk about everything WoW related. Today I am joined by Sha, and I will be asking him a bunch of questions about tanking in World of Warcraft. Right away to start, were you happy with the tank balance in Season 1?
Yeah, dude, it was so good. Like unironically, I, and maybe I'm like just this is gonna be a hot take for sure. I feel like most Mythic Plus seasons, Blizzard actually tends to favor one tank. So whenever there's two tanks that can perform at a high caliber, I think it's a pretty successful season, especially in the first season of an expansion. This is something I've talked about like on stream and as well as with some of my friends. But having two tanks in a Mythic Plus season, like the first Mythic Plus season of a season, is not common. So having both Brewmaster and Guardian Druid being able to do some of the highest level keys, and not just title keys, but like world first keys, is really, really cool. So I was really thrilled with the balance. I'm not sure how you feel about it, but it does suck that some other tanks are almost unplayable. I shouldn't say unplayable, but some tanks are really rough. But I would generally think that this first season was decent balancing.
So I was going to say, that is an incredible way to start this because that is an absolute, it's a hot take, but it
It is a
is
hot take.
sort of a hot take depending on what you're playing because you're right. There are two tanks that are good. We had initially in the season Brewmaster being the dominant tank. Then we had Guardian Druid getting buffed, and now Guardian Druid was the dominant tank. But you are correct. It's pretty good to have two solid tanks at high level Mythic Plus. It just feels terrible if you're a Prot Pally or a Blood DK or Warrior or, well, anything that isn't the top two.
It's like kind of crazy to me because it it's like kind of obvious almost in some ways. When you look at all tanks that scale with secondary stats, specifically haste, it's pretty natural for the first season of a tier where you can't even hit your first diminishing return that most tanks will feel pretty bad. Also, there's this really interesting thing that I've heard like Trell talk about, for example, where
Mm-hmm.
he just mentioned that a lot of people just are kind of used to the gameplay loop or like the gearing loop and the balancing for every season. And it's just, especially with how easy it is to gear tanks, that most people just don't have the time or don't care to try to figure out how to workshop a tank through high keys. So what they're doing is they're just going to re-roll to whatever is the easiest to play. Even if you're a Prot Paladin main or a BDK main, a lot of those players ended up just swapping to Bear or starting with Brew because it was good. And then as soon as Bear became meta, they just swapped because the gearing the system, that's a whole nother can of worms. But it was just like so easy to do this season. And so part of it, I think, is just a lot of good players have swapped off. It'd be interesting to see if, in an alternate timeline, if the people who were maining Prot Paladin kept maining Prot Paladin and didn't swap to Bear, like what the kind of shakeup and the breakdown would look like.
Okay, so that leads me into one of the main things I wanted to talk to you about today, which is going into season two and also just the future of WoW. Is there a way for them to balance tanks so at the very least perception says we can play most of these things in keys? I don't think you're wrong. I have played some of my prop pally only up to 20s, by the way, not up to the higher keys. I can see where it might be playable, but the question is why would I put that effort in when even if I play it perfectly, I'm still going to contribute less than my Guardian Druid would. I'm not going to do, I don't really have a niche aside from just having some cool shield throws and a little bit of utility, but I am squishier. Like, I do need more help from my healer. I don't do as much damage. I don't have as valuable of a group buff. How do we get it so that more tanks feel viable? Is it a perception thing? Is it an actual tuning thing? Is there a way that they can do that?
Dude, I wish I had like an answer. This is going to be a little bit of a hot take. I'm filled with hot takes, by the way, so this is going to be like,
Send
hopefully you
them.
don't get a lot of
Send them.
hate in the comments. But
The spicier, the
I
better.
I don't think Blizzard should balance tanks. I think
Too
it's
spicy.
okay,
Wait,
and
hold
I
up. Sorry. Wow. All right. Defend yourself. Let's go.
you
Okay.
gotta let me at least talk, yeah. Um, so I think Blizzard has generally done a good job, and I don't know if they do this on purpose or if it's on accident or if like the game designers actually talk to each other, like the class designers. But it feels like most of the time we go into a season and Blizzard kind of identifies which tank they want to be strongest. Because a lot of times there aren't really heavy-handed buffs or nerfs in either way. We go into a season, we kind of know what the tanks are. I think Guardian Druid this season was a little bit of an exception they were really trying to make the Apex talent work, and by doing so, and like obviously there's other reasons, they ended up buffing Thrash by way more than they should have, and we can both admit that probably.
Yep.
And then it led to this very, maybe not an interesting meta and playstyle where you're just Thrash Moonfire spamming as the most optimal rotation. But I think it's okay to have a tank, to have a best tank. Like that's okay. I don't need every tank to be able to play at the same level. What I want is, and I maybe this is where the take gets brought down or cool off a little bit, but I think that if you're a talented player or you're dedicated to your class, you should be able to play any tank to push for Mythic Plus title, the top 0.1%. But I don't think all tanks need to be equal across the board for pushing any level of keys. There are players in almost every single spec for tanks that are pushing 0.1%. And so to make the argument where it's like I can't play Prot Paladin or I can't play VDH because I'm not meta, I mean, there's obviously it's an uphill battle for sure. I have to recognize that, but I don't think Blizzard should do anything about it. I think it's okay as long as it's not like BDKs are suffering right now. They haven't been meta since Shadowlands, so like they need a little bit of love, but just make them a little bit more powerful next season. Call it a day. Let BDK be meta, and it's okay if the other tanks are a little bit behind. I think that's okay.
So
did I stun you with that?
A little bit. I wasn't expecting that for sure. You know, these things are not scripted, and I certainly was not expecting you to just come out of the gate with, "This is great." Okay. What I think
okay,
is
so
important to clarify.
I mean, if you have go for it.
No, I just want to clarify.
Yeah.
When it comes to talking about balance in World of Warcraft, you have to separate actual power and possibility from perception and access. I think the reason that tuning matters so much and the reason that people are so interested in having more equal tuning power across the board, whatever word you want to use, is because they are genuinely worried that they cannot get into groups. They cannot play. Most people pug and they use the looking for group system. There's certainly almost a stigma or just not as enjoyable to use your own key, list your own group, even if you are that Blood DK, and that might be the only way that you have access. Most people don't understand that the idea of progressing in WoW is oftentimes actually developing your friends list, building the network, building the contacts that will take you,
yeah.
even if you're off meta. But it is way more, it's more of a perception problem, and in that I agree. If there is a top performing tank, it's not like the other tanks are actually terrible this season. I wouldn't say that. I would agree with that.
No, like let's just, even in a world where like balance is as I don't think they can ever make the game without homogenizing everything. I don't think Blizzard could ever get every class into within 1% of each other. And what I mean, like damage and survivability, healing, whatever, like even just DPS. Let's say every single DPS in the game, all 26 specs or whatever it ends up being, let's say they all can do within 1% of the damage of each other. Players are still going to pick the top three. Or they're going to take the thing that is perceived as meta because you need the utility, you need the death grips in a key. And regardless of how closely things are tuned, people are going to still play whatever is the best, even if they're within a fraction of a margin. And so I don't think Blizzard should try to like almost eliminate the meta. The meta sucks. Don't get me wrong. Like it really sucks if you're not, one of the top 5 classes that are being brought to the top keys, and then all of a sudden that trickles down into the community. But that's more of a community problem than it is a Blizzard issue of tuning. Because I think generally Blizzard actually has been doing a lot better tuning ever since Shadowlands. I think every season they're getting closer and closer to classes feeling powerful. I can go into a key with a Shadow Priest or a Survival Hunt. Well, Survival's actually pretty good right now, but I've played with most specs this season in high keys, 21s, 22s, and they feel good. It's just, it's the community perception that's the issue.
I would agree that the community is what drives most of the meta problems because each season they seem to do a better job. It's almost too easy to forget, especially if you are a new WoW player and don't remember VDH supremacy at the end of Dragonflight, where they had the double sigils and were also immortal and also did extra. You couldn't touch that. I mean, if you were into VDH, you could literally solo CC a pack for 40 seconds, and then the next tank could do it for 5. Like, it was so unbalanced, or even when Blood DK was meta, they were meta because they walked around and just did incredible levels of, and that was when Brewmaster had their really cool tier set as well. It's not even like Brew was super bad that season. And I would like to clarify for everybody, you are allowed to make this take because you are a Brewmaster main. You've been a Brewmaster main for a very long time. So you are
Yes, I have.
not
Yeah.
coming from the perspective of like, well, I've been meta for a long time. This was actually the first time that people really actively wanted Brewmaster. So you are allowed
It's
to comment on this.
Yeah, it lasted for a whole 6 weeks, and then
Well,
you bear men came stampeding through.
that was a
Jeez,
ridiculous buff. You know why that happened?
I
It's
I
because
I mean,
so Blizzard. I was playing the no Apex before that was buffed because I like the playstyle because it's super straightforward,
mhm.
and I was actually always doing that already, but almost no one was, and so it was a build that no one knew about, and so they thought they were doing the right thing by buffing Thrash, and those values with how the Apex was playing was perfectly adequate, but then they didn't realize there was a build that would capitalize on that too much, and 200% Thrash damage was a little egregious. Did you
This might
ever
be a
get to?
side tangent.
I'll go for it.
So no, sorry. What were you about to ask? But I
I
have a
was just
little
gonna
side
say,
tangent off of
right
that.
when they buffed it, right before they nerfed it again, to make it slightly more reasonable, I did a key with Squish and 5 other bears, and we went in. We did the 20 Mysara Caverns and then 20 Algathar Academy with 5 bears. It was awesome.
Yo, I saw those. Yeah, that's insane. That's so fun though. Like, and
It was
you
really
know,
funny.
so it's so funny the bear changes. I get asked a lot of that if I'm like upset that bear became meta over brew despite having such a strong start as brewmaster at the start of the season. I think it's so like I don't like the playstyle of bear because I've gotten my bear geared and I'm like 289 or whatever. I just don't enjoy the playstyle because it's so repetitive. It's just like thrash boonfire spam forever and you can like live indefinitely. But I like when there's meta shifts like that, and I think that's really cool when you can bring a 5 tanks into a dungeon and just blast. That's sick. But the side tangent I wanted to quickly mention is just about Apex talents. Do you like having the ability to not play your Apex talents?
Depends entirely what the Apex talent is. Like
So,
Brewmaster's Apex talent is cool, enhances what I like about Brewmaster, feels natural almost. Bear's Apex talent felt unnatural. The way that you were supposed to play it was, in my opinion, counterproductive to how I wanted to
hmm
tank. So, no, because it involves setting up a very specific damage window and therefore almost sacrificing the thought process of threat, defensives, how to be a good tank. It was like, I have my Apex. I'm going to do 80% of my value in the next 10 seconds. So I'm going to start doing things for it. It almost encourages a selfish play style where I'm not thinking about my team anymore. I'm literally just thinking, but I am going to blast.
so I yeah, so I guess what I'm like trying to ask is, it feels like some tanks specifically, I mean, pretty much every tank, maybe outside of Druid and Warrior, pretty much doesn't. Everyone has to play their Apex talent almost. Like I don't. Did you ever play Brew Master like when you didn't have Apex talents? Like when
You
you
mean
were
like
level
before?
80? Yeah, when they got rid of tier sets at the end of the War Within, and then but it was before Apex talents were like implemented because it was like it was the pre-patch. Did you play Brew at all during that like
Not during
short
that
window
window.
of time?
No.
So Brewmaster's in this weird spot where you need your Apex. You cannot play without it. You'll be energy starved. You're just like you're not getting resets. You have no cooldown reduction. You have no healing, like no self healing. There's a feedback loop that's almost required with the Apex talent. So there's never a world where we can actively think like, okay, well maybe I don't need my 4th point, and I can take that point and put it into my talent tree elsewhere to get like more survivability or more damage. It's just the best option in all scenarios is just play your Apex. And it's the same with like VDH. It feels like the same with Prot Paladin. It's arguably the same with BDK. And I just wish there was a world where you can make a choice based on different scenarios to play your Apex or to put those points elsewhere. And it feels like Bear and maybe Prot Warrior were the only two tank classes that have been able to do that over the course of Midnight so far. And I was
Doesn't
just like curious on your thought of just Apex talents in general, if you like them or not.
So I feel like Apex Talents had a unique opportunity to address fundamental issues with each tank because what I'm interested in, I hear you on the one tank will be dominant because that's just how it's been for a long time. But I still wish that there was at least a little bit of aid toward the lower performing tanks, like even just slight buffs to current Prot Pally in the season. They have to be careful about doing that because it might be overpowered going into next season, which is something we might find. They buff Prot Pally this season weak, next season might be too strong. So it's hard for them to get it right. But the idea is that Apex Talents had an opportunity to address a flaw in that tank's design. So, for example, they add and really smooth out something for Brewmaster. That feels good. Even though VDH talents are necessary, I don't think they smooth it out. I think they're friction in maybe not a good
It makes
way.
it worse.
Right, yeah.
But
yeah.
but you also have to play because there's just
You have
nothing.
to play,
Like
obviously.
it's so good when you get it, but it's RNG. Dude, it's so frustrating. I've
We'll
been
talk
playing with
about that
a
in a
bunch on
second.
PR.
Yeah. We're gonna
We can go
back
down that rabbit hole later.
Oh yeah, we will in a second.
For sure.
But the idea was, what you're talking about is just talents. Like, aren't you just talking about, hey, the left capstone is good for raid, and the right capstone is good for, like, you're not talking about the way you're referencing it right now is just, if they're a choice, they're not really Apex talents, then they're just regular talents, which you have choices for that.
Yeah, but it'd be cool if like your Apex talent, maybe I just have a different like vision of what I thought they could be, but it would be really cool to have the choice where it's like in this dungeon I want to run all four of my Apexes because like my fourth Apex talent point gives me like this thing, or like group healing, for example, right, for Brewmaster. And so like there's a ton of rot damage in this dungeon, but in this other dungeon it's like just really bursty, or like we don't need the group healing, so I can drop this and then I can get another talent here which will give me like I like more damage or more AoE or more whatever. And I wish those points were more flexible because it kind of, they package this thing like Apex talents, right? Like you have 4 more talent points in your spec tree, but it's really like you're being forced to take these other things. And that's what I kind of like hate, is it'd be really cool to play with our spec tree with a couple extra points in there versus you're gonna get hero talent points, which are guaranteed because you have X amount of points and you have the same amount of nodes, and then it's like you got 3 more class tree points, which sure, but then they also fiddle with the points, and then you have the Apex talents, which is like you just slam all your points there. So it felt like we didn't really gain anything cool and new this expansion so far. They were obviously like cool during like beta and early season, but now that we've been playing with them for a season, I'm just like, what's the point of Apex? Like, why isn't this just like a baseline thing? Or like I have nodes in my tree that are like blackout kick damage increased by 20%. It's like, why is that there? And why isn't like the Apex a talent instead? Like, why do we have these really boring filler nodes?
So
where you could have really active decision making, but we just don't have that.
I 100% agree with you on Apex talents were a miss, just in general. I think there are some classes that even if you like your Apex talent, they were promised to us as an expansion feature, but we had previously just gotten hero talents, and hero talents are crazy impactful. You make a choice between your hero talents, and a lot of specs have fundamental gameplay decisions, talents, like it really changes how your character feels to be Master of Harmony or Shadowpan. It really changes how things. That's impactful. Apex talents are not that. They are literally just 4 talents on a tree that most people have to take, and they are upset when you don't take it, unless you're a Mistweaver, in which case you don't mention it.
They don't give a fuck. They don't.
I mean, they just
don't.
don't. Like, it's so weird. I don't know if I want them to cook more on it, because how are they supposed to balance the amounts of points we have in a tree with the pruning going into midnight, on top of the fact that we have hero talents, and there are already 2 different hero talents with 10 points, including 3 more now on each of those trees. So then they have to balance that with another thing, which is I think they're actually just kind of backing themselves into a corner, which is something they were trying to solve going into midnight. And I don't know if the Apex talents helped with that, because they specifically said, we're going to try to make more evergreen systems. We're going to prune things to give us a little bit more access. And so we don't have this ever evolving power creep or borrowed power system where, you know what I mean? Like, now we just have 4 different things to manage, and they can't really even manage the basic 2. So I don't know if it was a good idea to add Apex. I feel like they could have just added a few talents, but they wanted a
Yeah,
feature,
exactly.
clearly.
And also for the record, I love the Brewmaster Monk Apex talent. I don't want to sound like I'm hating on it. I love it. It's just there's times where I'm just like, man, it'd be cool to have like more flexibility or options in the tree. But yeah, I don't know what they're gonna do going forward. If they're gonna do anything, I think maybe Apex talents are here to stay. And in that case, I'm not against them. It's just I think a lot of tanks are coming to the point, and I'm a big advocate right now on VDH on this. I just think there's a lot of like rigid class tree designs or spec tree designs currently that just need to be revisited. And they just did it for Prot Paladin for like the 50th time now, where
Did you see
VDH
the
needs
new?
love.
Yeah. However, did you see the new Prot Pally tree?
I I
Oh,
did. I did. Um, I don't think it's good.
no, it's not. I mean,
As someone who plays Prot Paladin once every other season for a little bit, because I don't care for the tank. I don't care to fall over after randomly every 0.2 seconds. I do play Prot Paladin is my third most played tank.
okay.
I play it most seasons. I don't. I've pushed on it once. I back in season. This isn't really saying much, but in the War Within season 1, I pushed
Mm-hmm.
close to title, but I ended up getting title on my Brewmaster instead because I prefer playing it. But um, yeah, Prop Paladin's been all over the place the last couple seasons, and when I saw the train change, I was really excited for the changes when I saw the announcements. But then I logged into PTR and I started going over the tree, and I was like, they made the pathing worse
Yep.
somehow, like they don't. It doesn't make sense.
It does not
Like
make sense.
you have to path through like single target nodes to get to or you choose AoE nodes to then have to path through single target nodes to get back to like other like important nodes that you normally would just have access to and a lot easier access to them. I don't like the tree at all. I mean, I think some of the talent changes that they've made, like Seal of Appraisal, for example, I think is really good outside of the fact that it was bugged and making you take 10% more damage instead of reducing damage you took. But besides that, I just don't know what they're doing. I genuinely don't. And I need to dissect like the tree in its entirety and really like sit with it. But I was looking at it like for like 20 minutes the other day, and I was just like, what is this?
I played with it, but I'll tell you, I love Blizzard. Love this game. However, some decisions that they have made recently feel very like an employee named Claude may have been somewhat responsible. And what I mean by that is, do you remember midway through this season, one of the initial buffs to the underperforming tanks, where they specifically stated in a developer's note, they went, Prot Pally, we acknowledge that you are dying a lot more. Like defensively, you feel a little bit like paper. I don't remember their exact words. And they were like, we're addressing these because we want to help you. And the very first line was auto attack damage buff by 50%.
Absolutely, it's for the leech. The leech healing on auto attacks. Yep.
and, it, and it was
It's so
just, I stopped and I was just, what?
I remember those notes. I remember the prop paladins that I talked to were very enraged. That's so goofy. Yeah, I feel like sometimes they are just like plugging things to into AI. I feel like if you went into maybe this is a good exercise for anyone who's listening. Just go into your favorite AI tool, whether it's ChatGPT or Copilot, and just say, how would you prop paladin's bad? How would you fix it? And see what AI will spit out because it's probably similar to whatever Blizzard's notes end up
That
being.
is an Omega video idea. And honestly, I might steal that from you. That's good. We should do that.
Go for it.
That's
Yeah.
hilarious. That would be very funny to do one day.
That's gotta be that's gotta be how they do their April Fool's joke every year.
So, aside from some of the things that have been off, when you see any tank, especially when you're not meta, if you are meta like Guardian Druids, you look at every patch notes and you say, please don't be so bad. Please. Like, you know it's coming. You know the nerf bat's coming. They've designed a system where, as you said, in general, there's one tank that's giga dominant, then there's maybe a second tank that's playable, and then the other four are just kind of left out for a season. I would like them to address that. I would like at least the community to understand that it might not be as bad as it seems, but that perception significantly impacts the vast majority of players. Like if you have friends and if you're a title pusher and you have a pedigree and establishment, like your name means something, they'll take you. But if you don't have that, which most people, 99% of players who like Mythic Plus just don't have that network built, it feels impossible. I don't want to say it is impossible, but it feels impossible to play the thing that you like. And it's really a tough thing to contend with.
It's I don't know. I'm so torn on this because part of me is like you can't really do anything about the meta. but I'm also a like so part of me is like if you want to play and you want to push, just play meta. But then I'm also a big advocate of just play what you want to play and just ride it out. Um, I'm trying to look. Sorry, I'm like also trying to look at Raider.io right now because I'm trying to get some statistics for like previous seasons, like what were the representations of the tanks in higher level keys, not maybe necessarily title, but maybe the top 1% of keys,
I
just to
know
try to
that
see what the tank breakdown looks like.
in the top 2,000 keys earlier on this season, right before the Guardian Druid buffs, I made a video, and on one week it was 88% Brewmaster, and then the following week was 94%. And then the week that Guardian Druid got buffed, that changed like rapidly within a week or two. It was
Yeah, it
completely
was almost
inverted.
overnight because and honestly that I don't even remember the last time we discussed. Maybe we chatted before the season pretty much, but that that analysis, like just breaking down that whole meta shift is so interesting to me because it wasn't just you have a tank become good and other tank become bad. It was a like compositional shift where like Brew got slightly nerfed. Bear got pretty well buffed, but I think a lot of where the meta changes actually come in wasn't based on the tank's ability to live or do damage. Like Brew and Bear do very similar damage, and while maybe Brew struggles a little bit bigger in like or a little bit more in like those larger pools, what really forced that swap was actually the Resto Druid nerfs and the Mistweaver changes, buffs, and hot fixes and bug fixes. And so all of a sudden you have a why play two druids and why play two monks? So we're now going to take the best monk, which is now arguably Mistweaver, and let's get Guardian Druid in there. And that shift was so interesting to me because if you look over those weeks when those changes were kind of implemented, you see a drop in our Druid because it got nerfed, and then you saw Mistweaver kind of rise in popularity along with Resto Shaman was always kind of sitting there. And then the Brewmaster nerfs came in as well as the Guardian Druid shifts, and all of a sudden you see like these classes just getting knocked down a couple of pegs, but it's not just because Guardian Druid Omega OP, it was because of like a bunch of cascading other changes that ended up happening. And I think that's so fascinating, and I'm not even close to upset. I think it's so cool how that shifted like 6 weeks into the season.
I appreciate your optimism. I really do. I'm listening and I'm sitting here and I'm like, wow, you're so positive about the way you talk. I guess there's so much negativity about the
Dude,
meta and I have to
I hate the
reroll and
negativity.
whatnot.
Yeah, it's so cringe. I'm sorry. I like, and that's why I'm like, just play meta. I tell most people just to play meta, but then I'm so against meta because as someone who's been playing Brewmaster for 4 or 5 years now, like as a main, it's my most played class by far now. I just passed my Shaman, which I was a main for 7 years. Um, it's like I've always played what I enjoy, and I've always found people who I play with I play with people who are playing classes they enjoy, and I don't care what the meta is. We're gonna push keys and we're gonna push our classes to the limit, and whether we're only able to do plus 20s or plus 23s or plus 18s, as long as we're having fun and we're pushing our classes to the limit, that's all we care about as players. And so I wish more people had that mentality and had more of a positive outlook on it. But I know I'm in the minority, and I know I'm probably out of touch because I've been playing with the same group, and I've built a network of players who I'm able to. I can list my key in Group Finder, and most of the people who are going to sign up are going to be people on my friends list and people who are also pushing plus 1 or 0.1% titles. So I know I'm very like out of touch probably, but man, this game is so much better if you just enjoy the game and you look at everything with like a silver lining instead of being like, I can't get invited because I'm not playing Guardian Druid. It's like, well, you could list your own key. You'll probably have more fun if you play the thing you play and find just other people. Maybe just do a thing where you only invite non-meta classes and just like do a break the meta thing all season. And then maybe you'll meet some really cool people who are like crazy good one tricks. And then you'll end up in a situation where you're able to just like play with people who you enjoy playing with and have similar goals and a similar mindset.
There are
This
a few
game's so toxic,
things.
man.
I would agree with that. So there's a few things to break down. Number one, there's going to be a lot of people who are listening to this, and they're going to want to come at you for saying that.
Oh,
But
sure.
I would encourage them to take a step back and realize, imagine that you didn't have, like, let's say that you're a Prot Pally listening to this right now, or a Blood DK or whatever. Imagine you didn't have the access problems that you currently face, because that still is the biggest barrier. It's the absolute dominating, just terrible feeling. Not so much even how your class plays. Like, that's almost secondary to just the fact that you cannot get in to, like, you will sit here counting the fish in this pond for an hour and just not even, you'll log in and you'll be, I can't play. That feeling of not having access is Really, 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 really just that's what creates a lot of the toxicity, in my opinion.
List your own key.
So you could list your own key, but in a weird way, there's still a lot of pressure, and we could try to dive into it. But I want to continue on this point because if you took a step back and you realized I could play the game and I had people to play the game with, there is something special about making a goal that is a little bit more individual and a little bit less what Blizzard tells you you need to do. In other words, if I wasn't aiming for the 0.1% title as an arbitrary number, but rather I set a goal for myself saying, well, I am super off meta this season. Maybe the thing I love to play is tuned a little bit worse. But remember, if you could, let's pretend for a second that the community was a bit better about this, and you could play your character, and you said maybe the goal is not 4,200 IO, which is I think where you're at right now, but 39. That's my goal. That's going to be Resil 20s. That's what I want to accomplish this season. You would feel victorious if you were playing the Prot Pally and you had a team or some groups of other off meta specs. You would have to create some of your own strategies. Like, it can be super fun and involved as long as you don't objectively compare yourself to those meta comps. And I do think the game would be healthier if more people decided to play like that. But I still think
comparison's the thief of joy, man. Comparison
Yeah,
is the thief of joy.
I still think the biggest barrier is access. So let me ask you a question. How did you overcome that barrier? How did you overcome that wall and say, yes, I am a brewmaster. I haven't been meta for a long time, and yet I still have people to play with? How did you start developing that network? How did you get it so that when the Shadow Priest applies for your key, they're on your battle tag and you go, all right, Shadow Priest, maybe not the best spec, but I know that guy, he's really good. How did you
This is a great
develop
topic.
that?
Yeah. So I'm actually working on a video about this because I've been getting asked this a lot because I think obviously a big frustration, as you pointed out, is people do sit and try to apply to groups and they aren't getting accepted. So they're mostly coming home after a long day at work or after spending their time with their kids or whatever it might be. And they end up playing Q Simulator for an hour and then they just get frustrated. And that's obviously not fun. So you have to, a question that I'm getting asked a lot is like, how do you build your Mythic Plus group, or how do you network and kind of build that community around yourself? And I'm working at, like I said, I'm going to be working on a video that's hopefully going to come out by next weekend about this exact topic. And I'll go into detail here, but I guess like the TLDR is, like you just mentioned, you should set goals for yourself. A lot of people play this game, especially if you're someone who's pushing Mythic Plus, probably you have you're using this as a competitive outlet. You're either a competitive person or you like to push yourself, and this is the way you do it. I mean, I think most players are the same way, and that's why I do it. I was an athlete for years and years and years and years, and once I graduated college, I couldn't really compete anymore because I'm old. So WoW became that thing. And so the first thing you want to do is identify some goals. So, 20 Resil, top 1%, 0.1%, I think is a good goal to have if you're someone who's like really willing to put in the work, but it doesn't have to be that advantageous. And goals can change too. But maybe it's you want to get 15s. Maybe it's Keystone Hero, Keystone Master, Keystone Legend, whatever it might be. You should set your goals first. Because once you identify your goals, you know then where you need to end up, and the roadmap to getting there becomes a lot more clear. And so then the next thing you do after setting up those goals is you need to identify two different things. I call them red flags and green flags, very similar to what it means in like dating. You should identify things and characteristics of players that you think are good. And that can be anything from they do big damn, or they use their crowd control, or they you notice that they kick a lot. Or it can be something a little bit more like subjective or intrinsic, or I think intrinsic is the right word, but maybe you're looking for people who are like nice, right? You want to set up green flags for yourself so you can start using these as indicators to add people at the end of a run. So when you finish a run and someone did really good damage, or you notice that they kicked more often than other people, or they never died, or they used their battle res as soon as someone else in your group died, like who's actively aware of that stuff, what you should do then is whisper them. You should compliment them on that thing that they did correctly or that you appreciated, and then you should ask if you can add them. And over time, whether this ends up turning into a Mythic Plus group or not, you'll now start curating a network of people that you trust that do the thing that you identify as a green flag, that when you do list in queue or you are queuing, you'll see them listing their keys. You'll see them, or when you list your key, they'll apply and they'll have that little battle net friend icon. And then you know that player did the thing that you want them to do, and so you invite them immediately. And then as you start to run with people more, you'll start to build like that. I guess like that cohortness where you are like, oh, okay, we played together for a couple times. Why don't we jump in Discord or whatever it might be? And then next thing you know, you guys are pushing together. And at the same time, this is like a long rant, but at the same time, similar to green flags, you should also probably identify some things that are not so great. So like for example, for me, some red flags are like hostility or people who don't take accountability for like missing a kick. Like, well, maybe you'll be in a run and we wipe, and it's like, well, I can identify maybe things that I could have done there, like, oh, I had an interrupt up, or I could have leg swept, for example, as a monk. But if I was like, hey, did anyone have kick there? And then this guy's like goes off and he's just like flaming everyone for being bad, it's probably a red flag, and you probably don't want to play with someone like that again. And so red flags are just as important as green flags, and red flags are an indicator of I don't want to play with this person again. And so identifying who to add and who not to add is really, really important. And what this does over time is, like I kind of mentioned before, it builds a network of BNet friends who you can play with more regularly, who you can identify easier in a Mythic plus queue. And eventually, if you guys end up getting along and you jive with each other and you have similar goals, it can end up leading into a 2-stack, a 3-stack, a 5-stack. And then that's when you start taking your gameplay to the next level. And then I can go on and on, but that's the general way that I think it's how you would start forming a group. And unfortunately, networking is a big part of this game. And I know a lot of people that's a little overwhelming for people, which is ironic because it's an MMO, but it's an important thing to do.
First of all, this is easily the greatest hack for IO, especially over long term. This is the greatest hack that anyone could ever tell you. Like, this is by far the most important thing to do. And many people don't realize that so many of the competitive players that you see performing at the level that you want to get to have just done this now for years and years and years, and then eventually found their 5-stack through this process, and now play with that 5-stack, and that's who you see on the MDI. Or that's who you see. Like, those are the types of players we're witnessing. But I agree with you. I think that what's important is, if you're listening and you're thinking to yourself, it's a little scary, I want to play a game, I'm not here to socialize, I think it's important to realize you don't actually need to like that person. Like, you don't need to agree with their politics. You don't need to even really get in Discord with them until a certain point if you decide you like them. The point of adding people is that when you go to Group Finder, the name appears blue. And that's like the differentiating factor, is that when you add people to your B tag in game, you don't have to really know them as a person. They're just on there, and then you've identified at some point they did well in your key, and you would consider playing with them again. Likewise, when you apply for their key, they'll see, oh, B tag, and they're way more likely to take you, even if you have 1 or 2 less item levels, or maybe a little bit less.
Or you're an off-meta tank.
Or you're an off-meta
class.
Building that network in World of Warcraft, it can be so daunting for new players coming into this game to realize that there are people who have been doing this for 10 years. And so how do you break in to that as a player who either hasn't done this before, wants to push but hasn't pushed, wants to play but doesn't really know how to start making those connections? And it's at some point you got to just take the leap.
Can't think of that Spider-Verse quote. Something about a leap of faith and something.
I think it can be. I understand why it's scary, even though this is an MMORPG.
It took me a very long time to do it. Like, I started pushing keys in BFA, and I had a site group way back then, but it was just a group of friends, and over time, we like fell apart. And I had then a little push group with my old guild, and that fell apart. And I was like a pug demon for a while, but I was always too nervous to start doing it. But I made it a goal actually recently, like in the War Within season 2. I just was like, this season I'm gonna just network. I'm just gonna pug. I'm gonna go into Group Finder. I'm gonna queue things. I'm gonna list my key, and when I meet people, and that's when I started setting these kind of green flags. Like, okay, what do I look for in a group? And I might find someone who does do top overall, or they do the most damage I've ever seen any Feral Druid do, or a Frost Death Knight do, or a BM Hunter do. But if they were toxic in any way, all of a sudden that red flag was an indicator I'm not going to add them. But now I have a BNet friends list of I don't know, 150 of some of the top players on the NA servers, and at any point I list my key, I have a whole roster of people going to apply or just saying, "Oh, hey, do you want some help with that, or do you want to roll that up, or
Mm.
hey, if you do this, can we do then my key afterwards?" And now it's almost like I don't even think about Group Finder anymore. But don't get me wrong, I think Group Finder is still a really powerful tool because it allows you to network. So I'm actually not looking forward to like if they ever add a solo queue system, but yeah, I think getting yourself out there and just like committing to it and just seeing where it goes is like the most important thing.
You could even make a macro, by the way, at the end of any successful key. You could just make a macro saying, "Hey, I'm looking to add people. Can I add you?" And I would do this if I the times that I have done this, do it before you kill the last boss. Like last boss is at like 1 or 2%. Make sure you start opening that whisper window immediately. Do
I'm
not
not
let
reading.
people
I'm not
leave.
reading party
No, no, no.
chat.
You want to send the message right as they're about to leave because do not let them hold them hostage, tie them up, do whatever you have to do to send that message.
Just don't pull the last
There's
boss. Just
there
just
is a
stand there.
chance. Yeah, yeah. Until you add me, I refuse to pull the last boss. Whatever you
So
have to do.
I slightly disagree with that. I don't think you should open it up to the general public because, and what I mean by that is like I wouldn't say it to the entire group, but I and that's kind of why I talked about like these green flag kind of things is I would individually message someone something that isn't generic and be like, hey, I really appreciate you interrupting as many times as you did, or I really liked how you like would CC on the AoE damage, like that was awesome, or holy cow, you did the most damage I've ever seen. Like you want to almost give someone a compliment because that'll make them feel good, it'll make you feel good, and then that's more likely that they'll get to add you instead of a very generic, hey, you should add me at the end of the key or whatever it is. I think getting into that like kind of personalized message is so important for building that connection. And just like ripping a natty like just mass email is not I think the way to do it. But because you might also have someone in your group who you don't really want them to add you because maybe like you had a successful run, but like I don't know, that frost mage really kind of like ate shit. You might not want him to add you because they might want to, but if your goal is above where that you think that they might be capable of pushing, like you don't want to add people to your friends list who aren't gonna help you meet your goal. I know that sounds a little selfish, but
No, it's
the
fair.
point is like
In a
you
competitive atmosphere, you have to
yeah,
be selective.
you really want to well you want to curate your friends list because if you add people like if you're doing like weekly keys one week and you're blasting some weekly 12s just to fill vault because you just don't have time to push or you don't have the energy or the time or whatever it might be, you don't want to really fill up your bnet friends list with a bunch of people who are just really maybe possibly looking to just farm keys for their vault because you might want to push IO, and then when your goals don't align and you're adding people who aren't like going to help fill that, then you're going to get kind of lost in when you're trying to eventually push. And so I think it's really important to like curate that. That was a topic. Holy cow.
That was a topic. I was thinking it's actually such an important topic. I was just thinking how I wanted to respond to it. I want to keep
Oh, it's all
adding
good.
to it because I think a lot of players don't realize just how powerful of a tool this is. Like so many times you spend hours and hours looking up guides and maximizing your stats and optimizing in all sorts of ways for your knowledge as a tank, for your defensive rotation. How can I do this? What does that talent mean? You'll watch an hour-long breakdown that, Sha makes about Brewmaster, or you'll watch an hour-long rant I talk about Guardian Druid. But ultimately, the thing that will help you the most, those things are important. But consistency in the people you play with, beyond anything else, even almost beyond individual skill to an extent, what a lot of tanks and also a lot of players in general just don't realize is at a higher level, especially with the resilience system, reps matter a ton. Where no matter what tank you're playing, I don't really YOLO send my defensives. There's a world where I've already kind of determined it's like, hey, first pull out the first boss of Algathar, my incarn will come up 5 seconds before the first set of ads spawn. And you're like, well, how could you know that? It's like raw reps. Or maybe it's 10. There's a slight variance. Or when I play Prot Pally or VDH next season, and this is the next topic I want to move into with you, is talking about one of the problems with that tank is that it does depend on timings. So you say, well, if my DPS kill this in 40 seconds, then here's what we can do. And in pugs, you don't know if that's going to happen. So if the pull lasts for 55 seconds, or let's call it even over a minute, you might die. And at a higher level, you just think, how do they do that? But part of it is look at their defensives. They've sent everything, and the pull's dead. And if it doesn't die on time, you might be in trouble as a cooldown-dependent tank. I do think that that is a tuning knob, which does not impact players at the highest level, but absolutely affects the average tank. If VDH is meta next season, I am scared, Sha. I'm terrified for the community.
Don't even worry about it.
I don't think it will be either, actually, just unless they fundamentally take a look at some things. Consistency as a tank matters, and that tank is not consistent. Like, if you are playing with the tank at the highest level, and 70% of the time it works, but 30% of the time it doesn't, even 10% is too much. Like, your tank is the rock. Like, they have to be the one that kind of has the raw consistency, and then if somebody gets hit by a puddle, they get hit by a puddle. But, like, you're not really allowed to do that so much as a tank because the whole run is bricked. What do you think about the design of a tank being very powerful in cooldowns or requiring cooldowns to live, but not really being so powerful outside of that?
You're talking to a brewmaster, man. I don't know. I don't know what you want me to say. I don't have defensives. I just stagger. So I think moving specifically into VDH, and you can make the same argument with Paladin, is where you have to have like a little bit more of like consistent cooldown usage and coverage to live versus something like a Prot Warrior, which doesn't really need to, or even a Guardian Druid. I mean, you can make the argument Guardian Druid kind of needs to manage their CDs in some type of way. Like, you don't want to be sending probably Survival Instincts on your Incarn, for example. You don't want to probably send your Bark Skin on Lunar Beam as well, like in certain situations. But something like Prot Powder, more importantly, VDH doesn't have an issue with its, well, maybe I shouldn't even say that, but they have RNG layered on top of RNG to survive right now, and it's not good. And that class, I don't think will ever be meta until they get like a hard look at and like an adjustment. I think a biggest thing is they need a better baseline defensive tankiness, and they need their the RNG aspects of both their Apex talent and their preferred hero talent needs to be like really reeled in, because there will be times where you fracture 3 times in a row playing Annihilator and you get a meta proc because you just hit on the 35% chance every single fracture. There's also times where you'll fracture 10 times in a row and you get 2 stacks. And when that variance comes into play, you're just every run, even if you have an identical run in Nexus Point Zenith, based on your procs, you'll get to the 4th pull of a dungeon and you either will have meta or you won't have it for another minute and you're just dead. And that is the most frustrating thing, I think, for tanks, is you want agency to live. And when your agency is gambled, that's where there's an issue. And I think Prot Paladin right now doesn't have that issue because a lot of their stuff is controlled. It's based on like cooldown reduction or extensions via using your rotation. And it's really just knowing, okay, I need to like use Sentinel here. I then use Ardent Defender here. I use a Guardian of Ancient Kings here. I'm going to then let my cheat death proc, and then I'm going to go back into wing. Like you rotate through them. But with DH, you're literally like, you're gambling your life. And if that thing is meta, I will feel so bad for anyone who tries to roll it. And so you'll see videos from like Kira and now and like some of these top tank players, especially who are like in that social media space and content creation, saying how crazy strong VDH is when they're in their CDs. But what they're not showing you is all the times they died trying to get that pull to work.
Right. Yeah. It's actually, you should watch them actually play the dungeon live on stream, because they're showing you the highlight clip of the one time it worked instead of the 7 times that it didn't work. I really hope VDH is not meta unless they take a look at it for all the reasons you just mentioned. Defensive cycling for tanks is a skill that many tanks don't realize is the progression of what their focus should be on as they get better at tanking. So a lot of tanks still ask, what is my core rotation? The Thrash, the Moonfire, the Blessed Hammer,
the Thrash, the Moonfire, the Thrash, the Moonfire, the Thrash, the Moonfire.
But that's not actually what Guardian Druid's rotation is. Your cognitive focus is understanding not to have gaps or to sequence how to your Bark, your Lunar, your Incarn, your Frenzied Regen, your SI. Like, those are your active defensives. And a good Guardian Druid currently in this season, it will be slightly different going into next, has 100% coverage, not 80%, like literally 98% of the pool, you're covered by one of those things. Something that I go over in coaching, as I'm sure you talk about as well when you do coaching with people, is just the
Stagger,
defensive
baby.
cycling. Even as a brewmaster, though, understanding it's like, well, here I do need, like, there are some challenging pulls for brewmaster, and you do still have to make a plan and say, well, if that one moment I'm going to be in trouble, let me make sure I walk in with at the very least ox, if not also for brew, and just a plan. And it's important that you start realizing, I think that more tanks would benefit from having their focus be not on a complicated base rotation, but on defensive cycling, if that's the tank that is going to be meta. Brewmaster has the unique advantage of not needing to do this as much as other tanks because baseline, you have a rotation that is your defensive cycling. But I worry that we've almost forgotten how punishing it is. And the reason I say that is because even if Prot Pally is meta without the RNG elements of it, but still requiring that defensive cycling, there are fundamental issues where if it can work at the highest end and it's balanced perfectly for that end, the average tank is dirt. Like, because people don't understand how to do that. The amount of times that you have a Guardian Druid either not press anything or press everything is very high, actually. It's an incredible, I've noticed
Is
it.
that an issue?
Absolutely it is. It
Do
is
you think that tanking should be
100%.
easier then? Do you think that defensive management should be easier for tanks? Do you think they should just be tankier baseline and then you dev less agency with your defensives and you just live?
I think that
I guess
tanking
I'm
should
confused
be
on what the
more,
argument is.
I think that
I
tanking
shouldn't say
should be
argument,
more
but
forgiving. It's more of a conversation because fundamentally you have so many different types of players, but I think that the tank player base is split into two. You have those who prefer a complicated thing to master and then be able to express mastery over that because their pride and their enjoyment is just really nailing this very extremely difficult thing to do. Oftentimes, those
Mhm.
players tend to prefer something like a Blood DK and don't enjoy it when the current iteration of Guardian is meta because they're just like, look, there's not that much for me to manage, and I am not personally having a great time with tanking the season. But I think that you actually have the majority of the tank player base whose enjoyment of the game is based on their success as a tank. So if they could play something that is simpler, if they could play something that's a bit more straightforward, they would have a better season. If they're less likely to die with less things to manage, that makes their role easier, but that means that they can focus on all of the other things about tanking, the routing, the positioning, the pacing, the watching my team, understanding how to maneuver it, and they can do all those things. I think the majority of tanks are actually the second, where they are sitting here thinking, please don't make me do a calculus level rotation in order for me to be successful. I just want to lead my team. I want to not die, and I want to be a sturdy, kind of consistent rock.
I think we want the same things. I just think that the way that it almost I want tanks to be insanely good. And but I still want defensive management to be important. So I want like a good level of baseline tankiness or a really high level of like self throughput. But besides that, I think if anyone is in that boat where they want to play a tank that doesn't have a complicated rotation and can just live so they can focus on those other things, I literally think they should just play Brewmaster. Dude, Brewmaster is so easy now that you can just live. The issue why people are swapping off of it is because it's not getting them instant invites. And I think that's the other problem is it comes back to the whole meta conversation where even if you are playing a better tank for the bracket you're playing in, like your example was that if Prot Paladin is balanced for like the top end of play, but it's still more complicated for the average person is still not going to play the better tank because of the perception of the meta.
That's fair.
But Brewmaster just is like pretty easy. Bear is arguably an easier tank to play because you have a lot of coverage, as you just mentioned, through everything from Incarn plus a cooldown reduction, Barkskin, Lunar Beam. If you're playing, obviously, you don't play Lunar Beam really. If you play Druid of the Claw, or maybe you still do, I'm not really sure, but you have coverage for like all of these events. And Brewmaster just staggers OP, and Brewmaster is probably the only tank that actually can get carried by a good healer. So if you have a decent healer that you're playing with, or you want just more of a simple rotation and you don't want to have to worry about defensive management, It's funny that because you mentioned defensives. I don't think I think about my defensives ever. I just send them on cooldown whenever they're up, and I do keys. I don't know, man.
It
Um,
is
so
it is
it's kind of wild.
interesting. I wonder what would be the healthiest direction to take the game. I'm still of the opinion that you should make tanks powerful at, let's call it a plus 15, and then let tanks be however they're going to be at a plus 23. People will optimize and take this game to the nth degree. It's an infinitely scaling system, and also there are some players who are just cracked. And the things that they are able to figure out is kind of like them designing the raid for Liquid or Echo instead of designing it for a more average CE guild. And then they
For sure.
have to go in and adjust it. So that's what they do every season. They're like, well, if we make this for the World 100th guild, Liquid and Echo are going to go in and stomp it. They're so good, it's hard for us to balance properly for them. If we make it for
Absolutely.
Liquid and Echo, then the average guild is just going to get so hard walled that they're going to have a miserable time, and that's not good either. So what they do is they design it here, then they tune it, then they tune it again, then they nerf it again. You also get stacking power as you do this. The problem is that Mythic Plus doesn't work like that. They don't do that for Mythic Plus.
Well, it's an infinitely scaling system. It's a little different than a static system where they can just tune a knob on a boss and like it's a baseline difficulty basically versus something that's like they can. So, I mean, there's things in a plus 12 that you never think about, and there's things that as I coach players, they start getting into 18s and 19s and 20s, and all of a sudden they're getting killed by things they never thought about, and they have no reason why they died. Battle axes are a great example in Alcathar. They had no idea that they do arcane damage on hit, and all of a sudden you're getting one tapped by them after a leg sweep or a cap totem or something, and then tanks are like, what's going on? And it's like, oh, I need to, I can't be near those things. And in an infinitely scaling system, it's really hard for Blizzard to do that. Now, I would love a world where if you were playing, let's say, all defensive talents, as many defensive talents in your tree as possible, you should be near immortal. I think that would be so fun for tanks. But I think the mastery should come down to obviously like things like routing, but also like damage optimization from the tank's end. I want tanks to be super, super sturdy, especially if you're playing like defensive talents and traits.
I will say something something that I've noticed with content creators in general is when
Oh
you
no.
have been playing this game for long enough, you have developed that network, and it can almost bring you a little bit out of touch for what the more, I don't even want to say average, I just mean the player goes through. Most people do not have that network. And as you're pugging, if you ask, I would say 1,000 players right now, variety of key levels, anywhere between a plus 12 and a plus 20. So this is, let's just call it between 3,000 and 4,000 IO. You took a random sample and you asked them, what is the number one reason you brick keys this season? Overwhelmingly, it's going to be the tank.
So definitely for sure.
It's I would argue and I would imagine that 80 to 90% would say tank didn't know what they were doing. Tank died. Tank overpulled. Tank did some, but it's actually up to the tank. They have specifically stated in a blue note that they want more of the responsibility of the success of the key to come down to DPS contribution. That was a blue note that they made recently. I hope.
Yeah, that's why they made the health changes.
Right. Supposedly, although that has never really worked in the past the way they say it's going to work.
Well, so just to clarify, just for people who aren't aware, and maybe we're not even on the same page, but what Blizzard did is they increased player health and mob health by 25% without tuning really any damage numbers. So basically, key timers in theory should be tighter. So it's going to be just as important for that to happen. Also, there's a lot. From my experience testing so far, there are tank busters, but there's a lot less tank damage in a lot of these pulls, and a lot of it's going to come down to making sure DPS know what damage events are scary in some of these dungeons. Now, is this going to work? I don't know, because the way that classes obviously scale with secondary sets, even though they're buffing mob health by 25%, like DPS are going to scale at an exponential level compared to tanks. And obviously you have an infinitely scaling system, so you're always going to run to a DPS check most of the time. But that was their general. That's generally what's going on next season, and that's what you're referring to when they're making DPS. DPS's role is going to be a little bit more important next season instead of almost like they kind of just. I don't want to say a free ride because you still have to do good damage this season, but a lot of the responsibility has come down to high healing checks and hard tank like pulls. especially with the size of the pools and how much different tank damage there was this season. And so it'd be nice to see a little bit more of a balance. And I think it's going to be just as frustrating, though. I think running into maybe you have a bad DPS in your group next season, it's going to be rough if you're missing the key because you have someone who doesn't fully optimize their damage. But we'll see
In
how
a
it goes.
weird way, I read those changes and I was like, yes, this is exactly what we need. And then I thought about the fact that my hunter is now going to be asked to have more responsibility. And I was like, uh-oh, maybe this isn't so good.
Maybe I didn't want this.
Yeah, maybe we'll see. You know, my rep pally will actually be required to understand some stuff. That could be problematic. Not calling anybody out.
That
It's obviously a
just
joke.
not what brand of glue that they're eating. They actually have to know how to
Could be
like Velcro
tough.
their shoes properly and
They
put on their
will have to
overalls.
put
And
their hands on their keyboard. Could be rough.
oh no,
I
unlucky.
From my testing in the new dungeons, the way they're designing tank busters is better. Instead of them putting a nasty bleed on you, which requires technical timing on resets, which requires you to understand and having watched a video from you early on in the season about exactly when to roll out, otherwise you're just dead. They instead say, this thing is going to hit you really hard and you can kite. And that's a bet, like Altar of Fangs, the tank buster is
I
very
love
easy
it.
to manage.
I,
That is
I
better because it's effectively the same exact mechanic as we have in Skyreach. But Skyreach, instead of them just clapping you with melee damage and eventually you have to kite out to reset, they put a bleed on you, which means that if a tank realizes they're dropping to 20% and doesn't understand the mechanic, then realizes they should run, it's too late. It required advanced knowledge and you understanding the thing before you walk in. Whereas this is a little bit more reflexive, a little bit more intuitive. These guys, they start getting real big, real angry. Clearly, they're hitting you very hard. If you walk out for 2 seconds, you're good. I think that's a much better way to challenge. It's still going to be challenging as key levels get higher. You will have to manage it. It'll require effectively the same setup where you say, I'm going to leg sweep. Can you send cap totem? Can you stun? Can we CC? Can I stay in a little longer to do some more damage? Do I have to run? Can I keep it group? You'll make all the same decisions, but it's just less punishing for the more average level of keys. I think that is better. Do you think that they are aware, or like, do you think that the bleeds in Skyreach or the bleeds in Algathar, how can we design it so that incoming tank damage has that adjustment?
Bleeds are
It's a
dumb,
fair
man.
mechanic.
Bleeds are dumb. Specifically this season, obviously, we like as you mentioned, we saw Skyreach and Algathar. I think, and then we also saw. I know the bleed can't be removed as dwarf, and obviously bear's meta, so the dwarf argument right now isn't really that big of a deal as it was earlier on the season. But I really like their design philosophy going into season 2, and it's not just Altar of Fangs. It's also dungeons like Brackenhide where mobs get like enraged when things either die or they get a ramping kind of a buff or they get a temporary buff for a short period of time. And some of them are complicated because you have to be like tracking buffs properly on your enemies. But I think generally speaking, they're also making it kind of visually obvious. As you mentioned, Altar of Fangs, they like the snakes get real big and they start swinging really fast. It's very obvious. But what I like is that almost anyone has the agency to be able to help you out. Unlike in Algathar or Skyreach, where it felt like the tank needed to do the thing, and if no one could really help, like yeah, you could like send a shockwave, but if the tank doesn't move out of melee, it doesn't matter. Where these mobs, their buff lasts for such a short period of time that a stun, even if it's 2 or 3 seconds, will remove the buff. You can also like soothe it, for example. And so I do like that change a lot. But what I also find really funny is I'm not sure how many tanks you've tested in Altar of Fangs specifically. Prot Warriors don't give a damn about that buff. If anything, you get more damage if you're playing tough as nails. So every
That
time you
it does
block an
add
attack, you deal
so
damage.
much damage. I realized that when I was testing there.
It's crazy. And it's funny to me because more tanks are going to be, I think, able to handle it like in a vacuum or at a baseline level, unlike Skyreach, where like Brewmaster doesn't really care about that bleed because you rarely go above 3 or 4 stacks, even if you're just face tanking them. But every other tank falls over there. But in that dungeon, like Prot Paladin, Brewmaster, and Prot Warrior all felt pretty good against those mobs, and other tanks still felt okay, but they didn't feel like at a severe disadvantage, and you always have access to CC, where like I said, like in Skyreach, it just felt like one tank was way better than everything else. And tanking next season is going to be relatively more homogenized with the damage intake, even though I think Prot Warrior feels way better in most of these dungeons. So
So
I think the tank buster design is really good.
that is a tie back to what we were talking about earlier. You're okay with them having a meta tank because the alternative in many ways is to homogenize tanks so that none of them have a unique identity. That would be bad. You want to feel like you're playing a Blood DK when you play Blood DK. You want to feel like you're playing a warrior when you play. There's an identity that has been developed with each tank. So if they were to really fairly balance everything, it might not be good for the game. Nonetheless, they have to solve the access problem. I don't have a direct solution. This design of tank busters is going to be interesting. But if you just stop and think about it, how are they ever going to make it so that a Blood DK with how they work in their kit is equal power within 1% to a Prot Warrior with how they feel in their kit, which is also going to be equal power to a VDH and Brewmaster and Guard. Like, tanks are so distinctly separate from each other in what they're good at, and that is part of their identity. So it's an interesting question of how would Blizzard design a season? Because if the damage intake pattern next season ends up being heavy melee damage without bleeds as a tank buster, without a lot of magic damage even, will that feel good? Will that feel bad? Will it have scaling problems that we don't currently know about because maybe there's no way to really deal with it? Will it? I don't know. I'm actually really excited to find out. But before we dive into that and I'll let you respond, I have a follow-up question because this will lead me into an interesting little topic I wanted to ask you about today, Shaw.
This podcast is brought to you by BetterHelp.
That was
just going to an ad
so
read.
good. That was so amazing. It's not brought to you by BetterHelp, but that was
not.
amazing.
I thought you were going to go to an ad read for a second. I was like, what is going on?
Raid Shadow Legends, where are you at? Hold up.
You're like, before we get into that, this...
Dude, everybody listening, that was very good. I'm impressed.
Oh, thank you.
You should. That's.
I want to voice act, man. That'd be so tight. That'd be so tight.
I mean, Blizzard should hire you. I was.
Yeah, I would do it.
That.
I'd love to just be the human who gives you a quest in Goldshire, like, well met. You know, like I just want to do that. That'd be so sick.
When it comes
anyway,
to
sorry, what was your follow-up question?
If they decide that balance is something they don't prioritize, what if and should they, for hype reasons, add 2 more tank classes? Shaman tank is now a thing. Evoker tank is now a thing. Should they add more tank specs in WoW? And could they even begin to give that tank a unique identity that somehow works? What do you think?
I don't even know. I've thought about, as someone who mained Shaman for years and years and years, like it's still, even if I pulled up like my slash played, by the way, I haven't played Shaman in actual like literal years as a main. It's still one of, if not like very close to how much like playtime my monks have, which is nuts. So I've thought a lot about this because I want Shaman to be like a tank, but I just don't know if they'd be able to give them enough unique identity. I know some people have argued both with Elemental Shaman as well with like Survival Hunter as a tank class, where you like tank with your pets, but I just don't really know how like they would actually be able to flush that out and give it like a good identity, adding additional hero talents that would work with it. Yeah, I genuinely don't know. When Evoker was announced, I was really hoping that they'd have a tank spec. It'd be really cool, but I feel like it would play like VDH in some kind of way. Maybe not through their healing, but you would just like enter and exit dragon forms, and it's just like entering and exiting meta. I just don't know how they would actually give it a unique identity. I think the most likely thing, and when I say most likely, this is probably not going to happen, but something that I'd really like to see is I'd love them just add a Tinkerer class, and then you're just in a mech suit. And then your mech suit has a bunch of cool like little gadget things like poison bombs that you throw down and like electricity fields and just like you mitigate by like use armor plating on your mech that you like have to repair while you're doing it, and you like manage basically like a fuel resource. I think that'd be so sick, but I don't think they're ever going to do anything like that, at least in the near future.
You know that people do still care about the visual class fantasy of their spec. We talk so much about the meta in terms of performance, in terms of power, in terms of numbers.
My monk
on
is
your
green.
DPS.
Yes.
But you know, the truth is that a lot of people care about that. For a lot of people, Prot Paladin is holy power. You're a warrior of the light. I have never thought about it. Prot Pally is a tank that cycles between Ardent Defender. That's how I think about Prot Pally. But for a lot of people, I think the visuals and the idea of that fantasy would be epic. But if we ever wanted them to do it, they would have to let go of balance. There is no shot. They can't even balance the current 6 tanks in the game because they're so different. And if you make a Shaman tank
I do
that
disagree.
uses
I
the
think the tank balance
elements,
is close.
you think the tank balance is it really just the perception, you think? I don't know, man. I
Yes.
brought my Prot
Yes.
Pally into a 20 the other day, and it's not like it was unplayable, but it was tough.
I don't want to go all over the place, and I know this is a hot take, so I do want to quickly say, like, yeah, I think visual identity is really important, and yes, they'd have to, if they add another tank spec, it's just the more specs you add, the harder it is to balance, obviously, but I do think it's community perception. I genuinely do when it comes to balancing. Like, don't get me wrong, yes, Prop Paladin is definitely weaker than Guardian Druid, but I think the perception plays way more of an impact than anything else, because I've seen good Prop Paladins play. I've seen Yoda play his prop out in some of the highest keys at the time, in like 22s. And he did. Obviously, Yoda's a very unique example because he's one of the best players in North America. But it's like you can see these players doing it, so it's clearly possible. But when all of the good players don't want to waste their time, playing those specs, they're going to swap to the thing that's just better for their group because they're obviously playing in set groups, and then that defines and sets expectations for everyone else, and then everyone is just like a copycat.
Do you
And
have
I do
any
think that.
ideas about how
Yeah,
they
what's up?
could address the community perception issue?
Nope. I genuinely think that there's nothing that Blizzard can do. And everyone will argue and bark up the tree like balance, balance, balance. But I just think that it comes down to time. I think we're both in a unique situation where we get to play this more, maybe a little bit more than other people, maybe a lot more than other people. Um, but I think most people at the end of the day, just they want to get home from work. They don't have many hours to play during the week, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to just play the thing that's most efficient. When you want to play a video game, you want to play the video game. And unfortunately, if you're playing something that the community thinks is just less efficient, even if balance is arguably close, people are just gonna always. And I'm guilty of this. There's times where like I've pugged, like when I was pugging on my Guardian Druid, I tend to invite people who were meta specs because you might know that they're just gonna do better on average, right? Or I got invited over, like I sometimes will try to pug on my Brewmaster and I literally get declined because I'm not a Guardian Druid. And people just want efficiency, right? They don't want their time wasted. And I think that's ultimately what it comes down to, is it's just efficient. And especially with how great they made gearing this season. I know someone who was able to roll Guardian Druid. They leveled it from 80 to 90 in, a day. And by the next week, they were 285. And by the week after that, they were 293. And now they're almost 23 Brazil. And it's crazy how quickly you can take a new character if you have the time to, and even if you don't have the time, let's say it takes you 3 weeks, that's much better than what it used to take, which was, if you didn't start playing it early on in the expansion, you were probably always permanently behind in some way. But now with bonus rolls, you have access to 22 bonus rolls right now. You only have like 16 slots on your character. You can almost get 2 full different sets of gear, right? I think people just don't want to waste their time, and that's why the community perception is so strong. And there's nothing Blizzard can do, in my opinion, that would address it.
I think that ultimately Blizzard's role in this, until we could maybe address some of it in the community, I do think that game design furthers this divide. I think that if the bleeds in Algathar didn't exist and the battle axes were nerfed by 20%, you wouldn't feel as bad about playing a tank, because many pugs experience is that if a tank will die. If a tank dies less, you'd be more likely to take a tank because people will wait for 40 minutes for any tank to apply. And I do think that making tanks powerful as a game design theory, or just not having them floor pop as much, would help. But I also think that they could do little things that they're seemingly unwilling to do, mostly in my opinion because of raid balance. But I wish that they were just like, hey, Prot Pally is not being played right now. We're going to buff it by 1%. And you're like, okay, that's a kick in the face. It's a kick in the face because they very rarely tune anything. But what if they did a little bit more consistent? We're going to give you 1%, we're going to give you 2%, we're going to give you 3%. We don't want to change the meta. We want to respect people's times. If we've told you that you should be playing Bear, and you haven't already rerolled, fair enough. But we're not changing it. Now we're not going to make it Prot Pally so meta. We're not going to do this giant swing where now you have to reroll Bear in the middle of a season from Brew. But at the same time, acknowledging that certain tanks are underperforming and at least giving them a bone and just a little bit so they feel less bad for more of an average key level, I do think would go a long way.
I mean, I'm all for them like gently buffing tanks up. I mean, I never want them to really nerf tanks. Like, I think if there's a strong tank, unless they're egregiously overpowered, I mean, but we've seen seasons like that, like VDH and Dragonflight was a great example. But like, yeah, definitely buff tanks. I'm not advocating for like to keep it the way it is, but I just don't know if Blizzard really has the time and the resources to be doing that, which is it's so funny because like Resto Shaman got a 4% buff and like Feral Druid got buffed this week, and it's like it's like what, why, like why are we buffing so late in the season? And the other thing too, and I've kind of alluded to this a little bit earlier when I was talking about like early season tank balance at the very start of this probably episode, but it's like some classes are built to have a set amount of secondary stats before they feel good. I mean, I love Prot Warrior. I've pushed title on Prot Warrior in previous seasons. I played a bunch on the PTR, but this first season I didn't play it, and the reason why wasn't because I don't think it was maybe capable, but I'm just not going to have as much fun playing it, and obviously it's going to be a little bit weaker if I can't have a lot of haste and crit. It's just the way of the road. And in future seasons, like in season 2 and season 3, and if they do a season 4 for some reason, Warrior's always going to be really, really, really competitive. And it's the same argument for things like BDK and Prot Paladin. And sometimes, especially if you've been playing this game as long as someone like me, or maybe like you have, you just kind of get used to these seasonal changes where like the first season's always rough for tanks. It just, we have the least amount of main stat we're ever going to have for tank busters. We have the least amount of secondary stats to make like our class feel rhythmic. Prot Warrior's clunky right now. It's hard to have ignore pain uptime. You can't have permanent shield block uptime without playing like heavy reps, or maybe if you're like super geared right now, you can play into the fray. But it's like it's just awkward. It's not fun to play some tanks at the start of the season, and that also helps, or that will dictate the meta. Like Guardian Druid wants a lot of haste, but they don't need 30+% haste. They like it. It's good, but they can live without having some of the other secondary stats where some other tanks just can't.
I think tanks will certainly
so that's like a
feel
big factor.
better with secondary stat scaling, 100%. But I also think that isn't the reason why you see some season 1 metas are dependent. They really, I swear, they just actually either make a decision or they're like, hey, Jimmy, what's your favorite spec? All right, you're in charge of season 1. He's like, oh, Jimmy's like, I love Guardian. Buff it. Like, I swear, it's like that's actually what they do is they spin a wheel.
I do think Guardian, maybe they just have a dartboard.
It seems like that. And then they go, that's the one. And then they just do it until it is.
It's very funny to me how sometimes balance just ends up working out.
And an example is you could buff right now if you wanted to make Prot Pally competitive. Imagine that they were just like Avenger Shield direct damage increased by 200% and Refining Fire plus Bulwark is increased by 100%. That's basically what they did for Guardian. And all of a sudden, Prot Pally would feel really good. You do a lot more damage. Is that even the right change? No, that's just pulling it out of nowhere. But
that sounds like the right decision.
Yeah, but Avenger Shield is at least part of your damage, and then maybe there's an interaction with the Apex that I didn't think about and how that scales, but that's now an absorb value. It's like Thrash is a lot of your damage, but it was never just damage. It's also an absorb shield. So the problem is when they do that, and if they give Pally compensation buffs in the sense of actually messing with their kit, Ardent Defender is now 12 seconds instead of 8. But then they buff it baseline, Ardent Defender is still 12 seconds. And if they start messing with tanks, if they make one thing too powerful, now Guardian doesn't get what it needs going into Season 2. And that's the pigeonhole they found themselves in many times. If they have to be careful about adjusting how the tank plays based on its current power level, because then following that, when they nerf it, they might not nerf it correctly. And then it will either be really bad or too good. And I feel like, I don't know why they're so resistant to saying Prot Pally is a little bit squishy. Here's 1% stamina, 2%. Like, why don't adjust base? Like, they do that sometimes. But overall, it's not armor buffs or this. They start messing with its kit. And that can be good if it's actually needed. but I worry that sometimes that they back themselves into a corner. And the reason that Prot Pally feels kind of bad is because they got their kit changed with how their mastery works and more, and that was a problem. So I'm a little worried about that being a factor going into future seasons.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely were heavy-handed with the Prot Paladin changes coming into Midnight with their redesign, losing all of their cooldown reduction and their mastery bonus and not being compensated properly. And it seems like Blizzard's recognize that and they're making the moves in the right direction. Obviously, I think we're in agreement that the class tree and spec tree specifically is like doesn't look super great. I haven't tested Paladin since they made those changes. I played it a bit in the Altar of Fangs dungeon, but I haven't played it in this new dungeon set with the changes. But I mean, as long as Blizzard is actively reworking and addressing tanks that need it, I feel like they have a favorite, man. I feel like, can we admit that Paladin gets changed like every other season, and then there's things like Blood Death Knight, which I feel like has almost. I mean, they were going into like beta looking like top dogs, but like they haven't been meta since like Shadowlands, and they always feel so far behind for so many reasons. And just Blizzard never seems to make the right changes or gives them like the reworks.
Well, the problem is if they don't separate raid and mythic plus tuning, Blood DK will always have issues because Blood DK is almost like the holy priest of tanks. I don't know if you know how healers work enough. I think you do.
Big heal,
before.
small heal to get the big heal back.
Well, no, it's
I
not
think
just
I got
that.
the
It's not
Holy
the
Priest.
It's not the core rotation. It's the fact that Holy Priest, that's the raid healer. Everybody, Preservation Evoker, that's the raid heal. You don't bring it for keys. Could you play it in keys? I guess, but it's like almost like they're telling you straight up, this is the thing for raid. You will never be meta in keys. Because of just fundamentally, you have to give either a group buff or something. Like they have to take a look at the kit for keys or individually tune it. And when I say that they need to separate Mythic Plus and raid tuning, especially for tanks and healers, people like there's no way they'll do it. They don't have the resources. I'm not saying every ability. I'm not saying you need to hire different developers to specifically do. No. Take the two things that are impactful and make that change. When they nerf things for raid, it just carries immediately over to keys. And they don't even consider it half the time how those changes will impact each other, but they're fundamentally different game modes. So when Fury Warrior is performing too well on Ansarek and they nerf its AoE, it's no longer good in keys. And what if they just said, oh, hey, by the way, just like we do for most healer cooldowns currently, if you don't know this, like Trank and many cooldowns say in 5-man content,
scale with,
it's different. Or Atonement for Discipline Priest. When it's applied to 5 targets, it's this strong, and for every target past 5 targets, it does this.
It's like a diminishing return, yeah.
I
don't know if they can apply that to every spec, but I don't know. It's like it's also a weird argument because like the Ansarek analysis is really interesting with Fury Warrior because like despite Fury Warrior getting nerfed, and actually I was talking to my Fury Warrior players that I push keys with. We were actually talking about that today. But it's so funny how like that nerf like destroyed Fury, but I still push title with Fury Warriors. Like we were still able to do the highest level of keys. So while it sucked, it's just because something gets nerfed or isn't necessarily a meta class, you can still push some of the highest keys with it. I mean, most specs, there's someone out there pushing for Mythic Plus title on it. Not every spec, every season gets it. There are some specs that just kind of fall short, but I feel like if you're really advantageous, I mean, you can push almost any accolade in this game without kind of like falling into or giving into the meta.
So long as you have the network, because access is still the number one reason that people feel as though they cannot do the content they want to do. I think that a ton of people might consider themselves to be skilled enough for the 1% title or the 0.1% title, but simply they don't feel like they have the potential to actually do that content. And it's limited by a sense of access. I'm still so big on that right now because of the raid changes, and it's been the biggest conversation.
Do you think, so your argument is that Blizzard should just tune things better and players shouldn't network better? Because like I know we were just talking about like the tuning and stuff, like adjustments, but do you think that would really help, or do you think?
I do have,
because I think regardless of tuning, people will always play the best thing, even if it's within 0.1% of each other.
Okay, I've got an argument. I've got a cook about how to solve the system.
Hear it.
Recently, this whole conversation, as I've been talking to you, this has been a conversation without an answer. because I have not provided a solution. You've provided some
Absolutely,
good
yeah.
tips, but ultimately it's like, hey, how do you address the community problem? Both of us go, I mean, what can Blizzard do? I'm trying to. The little things might make a small difference, but I mean, the 1% stamina buff, 2%, it's not really going to change it. And the reason they use these heavy-handed things, because that's going to feel like a big impact. It's going to make people feel, and it's either good or not. But the actual solution is kind of simple. They just won't do it. I don't know how they accomplish this. You have to start incentivizing people without relying on this number, and I'm showing my IO in the background. This cannot be the thing, the only thing that matters, because the way that gaming has changed over time is people will pursue the meta, the most efficient tactic available. They will pursue that optimization because their time is valuable, and it will create a ton of disparity so long as your character, you're not a Wu anymore. You're not Sha in game. You are now your class and your gear score and your IO. That's it. Those are the only two things that people see when you apply. There is no fundamental way for Blizzard to change that unless they can somehow figure out a different way to incentivize and create fun in the game. Because ultimately, I had more fun doing the 5 Guardian, 20 Mysara Caverns. I already had that key. It wasn't IO, but it was just fun. And I feel like that's what the game is missing. I don't know how they return to that without completely revamping into a WoW 2.0. Because they've, over time, just gone more and more and more and more into this is the game. Compete for raid. Compete for this. Compete for that. And it's like, but WoW is an MMORPG at its core. It isn't a lobby game. And I think the friction is that. Like, I actually believe that that is at the crux of it, where 2 years ago, even though we had a meta, the perception of meta wasn't as bad because many more people were actually just like, but it's WoW. And now we're treating Mythic Plus almost like Fellowship. Instead of, do you know what I mean? Like we're so locked in on the you gotta compete that we're almost forgetting to set those individual goals and to set
So
those.
what's the solution? Because my solution is get rid of all the easy ways to gear and 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 like make it so you pick a character, you're stuck, and like either you
Okay.
push with it or GG. Like I don't know, man. Like it's
If they wanted,
it's
okay,
I don't
so
know.
let's pursue that because I actually don't. I think you're on the right track, but the only way that that would work is if you still feel as though you had as much access as the person who is meta that season. And the way that you would do that is in Classic. I don't want to really direct back way back then, but in Classic, the balance was terrible. Like you had some things that were just so much better, but
Doing
no one
double or triple the DPS of the other. Yeah, it's
but
like
no one cared because the truth is you would still take Mr. Steve who came home after work and put his kids to bed and tried to give his wife that 30 seconds of happiness and then logged in, and even if he was bad or playing the thing that you didn't want him to play, you would play with him because he could join the dungeon and it was fun, but it wasn't challenging enough for them to make it so that you didn't want to play with Steve because of the class he was playing. And that isn't the state of the game I want them to return to because Mythic Plus is fun and Raid is fun. But I think they have to take a look at that because I wouldn't mind committing to my Druid. I love my Druid. The class fantasy is there for me. This is my favorite character. I actually wouldn't mind not being able to play all the other things and kind of being locked into it as long as I always felt like I could play.
but you can. I think that's the thing. Like well, dude, I don't even know where I'm going with this, but it's like, okay, so if no one could reroll, but
Okay.
like let's just in this example where like gearing and alt is like outside of like having just double the amount of time to play, let's just say rerolling is like really difficult to do because there's no bonus rolls and there's no like easy way to get mythic loot and there's no like different raid lockouts where you can like pug and stuff. Um, I feel like it would be harder for people to invite meta classes because there would be less of them. But I list my key. Let's just say I'm just hanging out. We're looking to push our key up just to because it's a homework key for us. I list my key, I will have it's like that automatic jack tweet where I get 9 DKs who are all 293 at 4 KIO signing up, and I don't know which one to take because they're literally a carbon copy of each other.
Mhm.
But in a world where that wasn't possible, if a DK signed up, I knew that guy would be good because he's been committed to the class the whole season versus any other maybe arguably reroller who might be 5 levels lower because they obviously rerolled. Or their IO would be lower because they clearly rerolled and they're just a little bit behind. And so like that could fix the meta problem. And then more people like when I do see the Shadow Priest or the BM Hunter or the Sub Rogue sign up, I'd be more inclined to take them because clearly they've maybe stuck to it. So I think that's also like an interesting part is like when you list a key, you get so many meta people now signing up that anyone who's not playing something that's like considered the best is getting drowned out by even more noise. Because literally everyone can just reroll a DK or an AUG or a Dev or a Guardian or a Mistweaver. It's like actually kind of crazy. Um, but I don't think like the class you're playing is preventing you from playing. If you just stuck with Guardian Druid all season, and even if it wasn't better, like for me, Brewmaster, like I'm still able to play. I'll still sign up for keys, and if there's less people filtering me out because more people are playing meta, I'd maybe even have a higher chance to get invited.
I'm sitting here and I'm pondering. My
I don't know if that even
initial
makes
thought,
sense what I just said.
no,
Yeah.
no, I think it does. And sometimes it's definitely going to get you some comments for sure because I'm
Oh, I
sitting here
don't
and my
care.
first thought was, but you can't. Like you were like, but you can, and I was like, but I can't,
But you can.
but I could, and I
People
do
can
for
leave some
what it's
hateful
worth.
comments.
Yeah,
Yeah, and you
for what
do,
it's
and
worth, I have played
yeah.
Guardian for a long time, and even when Prot Warrior is meta last season, and even when Guardian, I played Guardian in season 1, The War Within, and I didn't get title. I also played my Prot Paladin, and it's just speaking from the community perspective and so much of the problems. At some point, Blizzard would have to take a giant step in an attempt to address it, because I think we can all agree that there is a problem of meta perception, especially when it comes, I mean, not even just especially when it comes to tanks and healers, just straight up, there is a problem with meta perception. If Blizzard was going to do something, it would have to be drastic. There's no real small change that they could do that would truly address fundamentally and just be like, this is. But what you're saying, that's a leap, but I think you might be right. I still think that there would
I
be people who would
so
actually just play 20 hours and just, even if it took you 50 hours to level a new character and fodder reroll, I still think there'd be
I'd
people who do
rather
it.
this might be super. I'm out of touch, and I'll admit that. But I would much rather have someone put in a lot of work to like if they were truly like miserable on the class they enjoy. Like let's say you're a Fury Warrior main and you love Fury Warrior and you can play that thing 20 hours a day and you might have a little bit of carpal tunnel and your wife might divorce you. But if you love that class and you feel like you feel like you have to re-roll and you're willing to spend the time, I much prefer that system than literally someone who logs in, they love Fury Warrior and they try queuing up for 15 minutes and they just that's the thing that triggers them. Like I prefer the former where it does take a long time for someone to actually gear up because I think people should play what they want to play and I'd rather have the challenge of re-rolling actually be a challenge. I'm someone who likes to play alts. I'm an altaholic, but like I just I like to play the things that I want to play. And I think that people should do that because I have way more fun playing this game. And that's why when I was talking earlier and you're like, wow, you're so positive about like the meta shift and stuff. It's like it's because I'm having fun and I'm playing the thing that I like to play and I'm not worried about the meta. I just think it's like interesting to analyze what's going on. And I feel like everyone has this comedy. It's so many comments for this. I'm sorry that it's going to be on your channel and not mine, but I think a lot of people play into the victim mentality of I'm not getting invited because I'm not playing meta, and it's like it's the game's fault, it's Blizzard's fault, it's tuning. It's like it's not. As someone who's been pushing title on a non-meta tank for years, and I play a bunch of non-meta classes, and I push 1% or Keystone Master or Hero, whatever I feel like doing, and 0 to hero challenges, I have way more fun playing the game personally, playing something that I enjoy, and I'm never in the mentality of only if I reroll. I can only have fun if I reroll. I'm gonna go play something that I don't want to play to have fun. Like, why are you even playing the game? Go outside, go play a different game.
Well, hold up, go outside. I don't know about the
Oh yeah,
outside
yeah.
comment there.
Okay, yeah,
You
grass
know,
is
we are WoW
gross.
players.
That is true. I know
I
that's a hot take, but
No, no, no.
man,
One of
I
the
just
reasons that I wanted to do a podcast style format is because if I approach you and I was just like, hey, let's make a 10-minute video, we could just cover two topics that ultimately we agree on and would work. But I like hearing different perspectives. 'Cause I'm sitting here and I'm really challenging my own opinion. The nth degree, let's say they were to do that next season, what that would mean. And there's two things I want to mention. Number one is I don't know if the gear should be the problem as much as almost somehow like leveling a character. Like that was the thing in Classic. It took you forever, and it wasn't time gating gear necessarily. It was just if I have to raid, that's going to be an issue for me. Raid is a big access problem. So I wonder how they could
For sure.
somehow change gearing on top of that to make it feel like you're rewarded for spending more time on that character. Not AP necessarily, but I don't know, like something along those lines.
It's
Perhaps.
so funny because if you asked me if we had this conversation a year ago, I'd probably have a much different take about like I'd be like, I want alts to be more alt friendly, and I want to be able to reroll the different things because I want to play different things. But now like we're in that, like the grass is greener on the other side. Like we're on the other side right now, and my opinion is now shifted where I think it's become more of a pandemic, and it's like hurting more people than ever because I know there's people out there who might be listening to this and they're someone who plays, I don't know, they play Vengeance Demon Hunter and they're just frustrated that they can't get invited, and it's just sucks that if you're playing WoW because you want to play WoW. Like it's really hard to get into this game, and if you're someone who's paying a sub and you bought the expansions and you're like committed to an MMO, like you want to play the game, and it sucks that you can't play the part of the game that you enjoy the most. And so now it's weird because it's like, yeah, they could. I don't think they should ever make leveling harder. I think leveling should be easy. I think it should be easy to get things up to level 90. And I think it should be good to get started. I like the prey system. I love the prey system. I love delves. I'm like a mole person, dude. I could be doing delves right now. I'm not, but
So the nth degree, though, I want to take that point. If
so
they were to make this system, one of the other consequences of it would be that you would play alts. You just wouldn't expect to play them at the highest level. You would feel more rewarded actually because your alt wouldn't be as geared as your main, and you would say, well, I'm going to do a plus 10, and that plus 10 is going to feel a lot better because I'm not 290 on that alt.
yeah, for sure.
And you would have a lot more people who still enjoy their alt characters, but the expectation is not that your alt is somehow as geared as your main.
The limitation will always be time. Like, and even in a world where things weren't alt friendly, if you had the time, you can get a character. You can gear it alongside your main, or you can gear it. Eventually, it would take weeks. It wouldn't be like something you can do in a day. Like I know players who will leveled up a new Guardian Druid when the 0.7 patch came out, and they re-geared a tank just so they can have a better execution of their bonus rolls. And like the fact that you can do that in a week is just insane to me, and that people are so engrossed in trying to be as optimized as possible for pushing keys that they're willing to re-roll the same tank to get their gear, or the same class. Like you can any example, but it's crazy, right? Like that's insane. Like I messed up on my bonus rolls. Like I sent them on some bosses that I like no longer need anymore. And then when the Sporefall raid dropped, I couldn't do the kind of like, I don't want to call it abuse because it was intended and Blizzard made a statement, but people would then just spam re-roll a Sporefall. But if you use your bonus rolls like they were kind of intended, like every week, and you just kind of sent them wherever you kind of wanted to fill gear in, all of a sudden you get to this raid. Now you have to do this raid 5 weeks in a row. Or the other option, gear a new tank, or a new healer or a new DPS, and you can just do the same thing. You give it a little bit of time, and all of a sudden you're now you have an alt that's more geared and more optimized than your main that you've been playing all season, which is just blows my mind how that's even a thing.
Okay,
yeah, go back to it. Sorry, I go on tangents.
That's fine because I want to stay on this point because I'm really you've challenged me here, and I'm thinking about it. One of the issues I have with WoW is that my attachment to my character is not as valuable as it used to be. It doesn't mean as much as I felt like it used to. Like my druid is just a character on a screen, but what you're suggesting would help with that. I would feel like a druid player, and that would mean something because it would require more investment. Like sometimes, initially, I was like, "There's way too much friction with what you're talking about," but sometimes friction is healthy.
I mean, absolutely. And so you feel that way because of how easy it is to gear and to like get a character like bissed out. So see, I'm attached to my monk. Like, I mean, I have 4 monks, but I'm really attached to my main. And I would like, I don't like, I'm personally really attached to my character, but like what makes me different than if someone really wanted to, and despite Brewmaster not being like the strongest tank right now, someone could level if they had 20 hours in a given week, they could sketch out a plan, and they could probably get a new Brewmaster to exactly where my Brewmaster that I've been playing all season. And that kind of sucks. Like, I can inspect a random Brewmaster who's 2 days old, and I'm like, oh, I've been playing this game for 15 weeks, and you caught up.
Okay. All right. I'm more sold on it. I still think there are some problems. I don't know if they're not going to do this. The other thing that many people suggest as a way to help the system is like spec specific titles. What if, a survival hunter had a different Mythic Plus title for either the 1% or the 0.1% as
I
a
think that would cause
DK?
issues.
I think it would cause issues right now because you would just have a lot of the top teams go collect all the titles because why not? But if you had to really invest in a character and they somehow got that right, I don't know how they would do that, but if they somehow got it where I felt very rewarded for being a druid, then it wouldn't be so easy for me to just go get it on Prot Pally and then also go get it on VDH. And then also, I mean, I might, you could also limit it per account. That would be one way. But it would feel, I think it would give a lot of life back in the game if it meant something to be a survival hunter. There's a lot of people listening who, as you said, I'm a VDH player, and I want that to be valuable. I want it to be cool that I've invested so much time, could express my mastery, and will actually do the work to get my VDH geared and ready for keys.
I mean, I don't think a spec specific title would be great. And really quickly, I just want to clarify like the whole gearing and like making it less alt friendly. That's an idea that we kind of just shot off. That is not something that I really like want to like get behind, but it's an idea of like how you make this kind of system meta thing better. But when it comes to those specific titles for classes, I don't think they could do it and do it well. What I'd like to see them do to start, and I think they're already moving in the right track with this, is they have started to bridge the accolades from Keystone Hero or Master Legend, I guess it is now, which is 3K. There was this massive gap all the way up to the 0.1%, right? There's nothing in between. And right now they're now adding a 1% title and a mount. So I hear so many players who normally would just kind of push IO and then taper off. There's a lot more tanks, at least in my community, that I'm so proud of them, and they're all really getting excited about
So
pushing
many.
still, and they're pushing for that 1%. And I couldn't be more proud. I'm like, they're asking me questions. They're like, I'm doing a ton of coaching, and it's like been awesome. It's been super rewarding, on both my end, but also seeing tanks do that. But what they should do is maybe introduce some accolades between the 1% and the 3K that unlock based on tiers. So let's go like you unlock something at 3,200, 3,400, 3,600, 3,800, all the way up. And that thing can be maybe not it's probably going to be a recolor. Let's be honest. It's always a recolor, but like introduce a unique looking class set where as you climb up, you unlock the boots and the belt. And then the next like little accolade, you get the chest and the shoulders, and then you get the pants and the helm. And then you're farming as you go a class specific set. This obviously doesn't really work for specs because the Feral Druid set looks like the Bouncer set. They're just the Druid set, but you can farm something that would be unique and have you chasing. It's similar to the PvP. I know a lot of my friends PvP, and they do that for the PvP set, and you unlock the transmog items as you climb up 100 rating or 200 rating, whatever it ends up being. And I think Blizzard could do that as it could be something that starts to bridge that gap where maybe they can go into like spec specific titles, but I think there's a huge issue with that based on what is and what isn't meta. And then there's people, admittedly like myself, who sell these things that we sell keys. But there'd probably be so many buyers who'd be looking to get into those brackets.
You and I are on the same page though on stepping stones is a game design system that would help the toxicity in keys. Because you need to reward people for doing what they want to do, not make them feel bad for not being able to do what they want to do. That's just good game design. Because if Dark Souls comes out and it's double the difficulty, some people, like very few people, will be like, this is so cool, and I will be here for the next 10 days fighting this one boss. Most people are just going to be like, nah. But at the same time, you don't want to make it too easy because then there's no friction. So you want people to feel rewarded for overcoming a challenge. And World of Warcraft has had a problem, as you pointed out, where the only thing they told you that you should go for was 2K or this or 3K. And now adding the 3,400, many people were also having that as a goal. And if that's your goal, it probably fit where you were at in the game, where you're at in your life with how much time you can put into the game. And it felt good to get. The 1% is very competitive this season. It's way higher than I thought it was going to be. Initially,
And it's probably gonna get a good jump because I
dude,
do
I
think
think it's
there's
going
gonna
to
be
be
a
like
lot of
result
buyers.
21. Not just buyers, but it's
I don't think
also a
it's gonna be
key
result
level.
21.
It's also a key level where your friends, if you like someone and it's the last week and you go, you wanted the 1%, I got you. And I don't even think you have to. A lot of people will just get it because
Half
they'll
my guild
log on.
wants it, and so
Right. And
it's
so
gonna
you're,
shoot up drastically. There's like
yeah, but
4 or 5 people already that I'm gonna be helping out. So
exactly. They don't have to buy it because that level of key, you can actually just kind of bring somebody that may not carry their weight and you'll have Brazil. So you can just kind of blast them. I think that that's going to be the main reason it jumps, not even as much the buyers. But
it's
you
also
gotta
gonna be
have it.
like relatively gay capped. I don't think it'll be 21 Brazil, but I do think it'll be you need 20 Brazil plus a couple 21s. I
In
do think it's gonna
NA,
be
at
relatively
least,
high in
to
NA
clarify,
specifically,
right?
right?
Because
Like
EU is already that.
yeah, EU's different. Whenever I talk about IO and like rankings, I will always refer to the kind of the region I play in.
Hmm.
It's like good to talk about everything but I think it's important to always be specific. But like yeah, like it's always NA because the way that EU players and CN players play are totally different. NA players just suck. So
Now, I don't script this. I don't script these episodes. I'm still very caught up in you mentioning that if they somehow made it more restrictive instead of more accessible for classes in particular, whether that would be a good or bad. I was so resistant to that when you first said it. I mean, I actually was sitting here and I was just like, but Shaw, like, wait, let me say, like, that won't work. And then I thought about it more, and the more I think about it, you have to restore people's attachment to their identity in the game because that is part of what makes the world of Azeroth magical. And I know I say that's like, wait, it's like a Mythic Plus competitor. Yeah, but that's tied into it. It is an MMO. You are supposed to enjoy the character you play. It isn't a lobby game where you simply choose a champion for that. And even in those games, people are still mains of a specific champion where they feel an identity. They're like, that's me. That's my character. And in WoW, we've moved almost away from that because of the choices that both Blizzard has made and the community has evolved into. And so I wonder what they could do to restore it. And even though I'm not sure that that is the full solution, and this is not I didn't tell you we were going to talk about this in advance, so you didn't have any time to prepare this either. It was just off the cuff.
I'm just riffing, man. It's July 4th. Fireworks are
Yeah,
going off, and
yeah.
I'm just vibing.
But the thing is, I think you're right. They ultimately have to make you feel somehow positively more invested in the character you're playing, and that will help you tie your sense of identity less to your score, less to your gear score as well. And then those problems of whether or not you're going to feel terrible for not mythic rating next season because of the gearing changes might actually get a little bit better. It might lessen some of the pressure as an end result instead of add to it. And for people listening, you have to remember these are recorded live and even on stream as a one statement. Try not to jump on someone's comment immediately. Sometimes we'll be having a
Are you
conversation.
streaming this? Am I just
No, no,
learning
no, no,
about
no,
this?
no, no.
Okay, I was like,
But no,
wait a second.
you know how sometimes if you actually riff in a video and it's not scripted and you go, I wonder if that would work. Somebody will hear that and then immediately they'll comment and they'll be like, that won't work. And I was like, no, no, no. I was asking a question. I'm not saying that that's my
I was
perspective.
being inquisitive. Yeah, yeah.
Right. I
for
was
sure.
just pointing out we have to be willing to brainstorm kind of all directions here. And they go, no. And that happened. That does happen a lot. So just, you
Yeah,
got to listen to
sometimes
the whole episode.
sometimes
to get
L
context.
sometimes L YouTube comments, but normally they're W's.
Well,
It would be interesting if they did it because like the random other thing is I highly respect anyone who plays non-meta and sticks to it because more often than not, if you find someone like a Fury Warrior who just like is a Fury Warrior diehard, they're probably gonna play better than the average Death Knight, for example, this season. And I think if players are more or less forced to stay on the class that they enjoy, which I think also if you just enjoy something, like let's just say you enjoy your job or you enjoy like you have a hobby that you do outside of WoW, like let's say you like love to freestyle yo-yo or you roller skate, you're probably going to be pretty good at it versus like getting forced to, do something else, right? So if you enjoy the thing, you're probably going to naturally put in more work and you're going to just feel more comfortable and you're going to be better at it. And I think that is a world that I prefer, having a more diverse community than having 95 DKs and 3 Aug Evokers queue up to my 22 Mayasara caverns.
Hmm.
One other random note, unless you have something to comment off of that. Um, have you earned a Keystone Victor title this season?
No, I was close to it early on, but no,
I
I'm not.
wonder if they did some. Okay, so Keystone Victors, by the way, it's like something they added this season, and I don't. I like the idea of it, but I think that right now it's being executed poorly. So basically, what it is if you time the top level key on your server for that given week, you get given an accolade. It's an achievement that doesn't have points. It gives you a unique title that you can use for that week, and at the end of the week, it goes away. And so if you like, it's obviously a very select group of people who time it, and in like the coolest situation, only one group times the highest level key, and everyone else is below them. So there's only 5 people in the region who have a single title for a week, and I think that's interesting. I don't like the way it's implemented. I think titles are bad in game. I think they need to do some other type of reward somehow, but like have some cool character glow. I don't know, like something dope. But
Mhm.
they could maybe extend that to specs. Instead of like a title for the end of the season, if you were the highest resto druid who timed a Maya Sara caverns, you get a little accolade title and or a little accolade achievement and some type of cosmetic effect for that given week if you earn it. Or like you can unlock them like the Infinity Stones over the course of a season, and if you collect all of them, I don't know, like. But I
Okay.
think that could help solve the thing. I don't think doing a spec title by the end of the season would work as much as it doing something weekly in game based on the highest spec for the region. But I don't know how easy it would be for Blizzard to track that.
I think that they should, first of all, visual glow character, good. Because very few people inspect you while you're sitting in Silvermoon, but visual is that feeling of, wow, that guy has that
Did
legendary.
you?
You know,
This is random.
that's
Did you ever play
visual.
Halo 3?
Yes.
Do you remember like the glowing skull like head piece that you got from doing like a bunch of achievements and stuff? Do you remember that? Like how
I
dope
don't
that looked?
actually think I ever did the achievements in Halo. I was
But do you
maybe a
remember?
little
Do you ever
younger.
remember?
I
Oh,
can't say
okay.
I
You should,
remember. I
dude.
remember Halo 2. The only way I would ever win against my brother was trying to obtain a rocket launcher and getting lucky.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
Yeah, that's what I
Um,
remember mostly from Halo.
anyone listening who was a Halo 3 fan who played like multiplayer online, like if you I forgot what the achievement was even, but like there was like a flaming skull mask that was like super dope, but it was a visual thing. You didn't have to really know. Like if you knew, you knew. And I think
That's
if they
cool,
did a
actually.
glow, like a visual effect in game, like you don't like you just said, you don't have to inspect anyone, but if you saw some like demon hunter or blood death knight or whatever standing there with like this dope ass aura, you'd be like, wow, what the heck is that? And then you'd like inspect and they have like a unique buff and you'd be like, oh, what, like I think that'd be so sick. Oh my God.
Prestige matters. Like prestige in the sense of this is a world, and seeing that thing, and you're like, whoa, that's super cool. Very, very awesome idea. And I kind of wish they cooked more on that, not player power. Because the thing is, nobody's going to really inspect you to say, wow, you have the 337 trinket that I'll never get. No one, that's not actually the thing that really drives, like, I really want that. The mounts are cool, but we have so many of them now that it's almost a little bit not as valuable as it used to be. But I want to continue on something else you said. The Keystone Victor is way too exclusive. If they extended it,
Yes.
the amounts of people that influence and impact, I think that if they're going to make any amount of effort for game design, you really have to be careful about consistently targeting the 0.1%, or even in this case, higher than that, because those
It's much
people
higher than that. Yeah.
are chronically addicted and will not quit. You do not need to consistently be helping them. They are the ones that you have your claws hooked so far into that type of player that you kind of don't need to give them more and more. You need to help people get to a level that they feel very happy with. But like that, you know what I mean? Like sometimes they make decisions and I'm like, that person isn't, the chances of them uninstalling and unsubbing is super low. like,
Absolutely.
I,
Yeah, I'm not a fan of the Keystone Victor achievements. But I think it's an interesting concept that they can elaborate on. I think it's like you said, it's way, way, way too exclusive. Like I have all of them. I've gotten all of them over the course of the season, but it's like I don't care, but I do. Like I care in the sense like I would love if it was like expanded out more in more unique situations. I think specs would be good, and I wish it was more noticeable. Like no one reads titles. I mean, I don't even have friendly names on. Like
that's a good
so I
point,
don't know
actually.
what people titles have, or you just a lot of people just have names because titles take up too much real estate on your screen,
I don't
and so
use
no one really cares.
I don't use any of the titles. The only title I use on every one of my characters that actually shows my undying devotion to this game is the Tower Ranger achievement, which I earned when
Oh,
it was
there you go.
current in Torghast. Because
Oh,
I like Shadowlands and played it. That's when I came back to the game after moving to
yeah,
Thailand, not playing for a while. So for me, that's my favorite title, believe it or not,
yeah.
was Tower Ranger.
And it's good to you, but I'd be honest, if I saw that on you, like
I would
I
know.
don't care what your title is. And if you saw like any of my titles that I've gotten, or even the Keystone Victors, you probably wouldn't even know what it meant. If I put on
Yeah.
the one of my Keystone Victor titles right now, you'd probably be like, "What is that title? How'd you get it?" And I'd have to explain to you how I got it, and then you'd be like, "Oh, cool, whatever."
I
Like,
still
like you know,
I think that them returning to a little bit more of that MMORPG feel would help. And part of that is, you see somebody with the legendary, and that legendary is very visually noticeable. Not because player power, but you go, "Whoa, you got the glaives? Whoa, you got this? Whoa, you got that?" And I just think that that is kind of a fundamental almost piece of nostalgia that we all have. They can't balance the game for that power level spike you used to get, but they could at least give you some form of visual prowess. And almost it's an oversaturated thing in WoW to just give more mounts and more this. Even though the mounts are cool, you have so many of them now. Like, and I think that I wonder how they can cook. I don't have a solution, but I wonder how they can cook to continue motivating people to just play and really enjoy the game.
yeah. I hope they keep moving in this direction. I mean, I think they're doing good. I just think they need to keep doing better.
There are plenty more things I'm sure we could yap about. We're at kind of the 2 hour mark of this, and I wasn't actually anticipating it being 2 hours. I knew we would yap, but I didn't realize we'd yap this. You just really got me with that last take. On the surface, I was like,
That's what
Shaw,
I'm
I
here
want to
for,
come over
baby.
there. I want to find you and I want to slap you across the face. But
Hell yeah.
actually, I might have to change that mentality a little bit because I think you're cooking. I think I just want to feel, and I think that people would feel so incredibly happy restoring a sense of identity and not saying I'm a tank player who just obviously plays all six tanks and has to, I'm just whatever's going to be meta next season. And instead thought, this is me. And I think that would be really cool. I think some people do think that right now, but it's not valued.
Probably. I would agree with that. Yeah.
Okay.
It's the only counter thing, or not even counter argument, but it's like it would. I think if we did go to a system where they made alts less friendly, and you kind of have to pick one, I think people would be like choice paralyzed. I don't know whatever word I need to use there. It's getting super late. Um, where it's like I might not even play because I just feel like if I make the wrong choice, I'm just screwed. And yeah. But anyways, I don't. I'll go down a rabbit hole with that. So I'll leave it.
Yeah.
I don't know
No,
what I'm saying
there's
anymore.
this is not a fully fleshed out take. We'll have to continue this another day and just continue. Really, I'm going to start talking about this a lot more just because how would it impact raid? You have a very specific raid comp. Would you be able to even raid in the current guild? Would you have to find a whole new group because now you have group buffs to factor in? And what if everybody decides actually, well, my favorite thing is this, and now, well, we don't have a warrior. It might be really hard, or maybe it'd be easier because you have more warriors. And how would that really impact that? I feel like they should just get rid of group buffs in general for Mythic Plus, anyways. That's another rabbit hole, which probably won't get started on. But
Oh no.
how
I
would
can feel the urge. I can
you
feel it.
feel the urge is there?
Oh,
No, hold on. No. Don't do it. Don't do it. Restrain yourself. Restrain your dog needs you. Um,
he's passed out. He's the fireworks stopped, so he's vibing.
I'm glad he survived the night. Uh, this game, it's magical. You've been playing for a long time. I have. At the end of the day, even if people have contrarian takes, even if people have very different opinions on what should be done, we love it. That's the whole reason we talk about it so much. It's because we're passionate, because we care. The reason people care so much about the meta is because people want to enjoy their game time. They want to feel rewarded for it. And that is no one can argue with that. You should feel good when you log in, and you should be able to have fun, kind of regardless of where you are on the competitive bracket or the spectrum of player. And if you're a little older and have kids, or you're young and don't have kids yet, you should be able to enjoy the game.
Amen.
If people want to find more of your content, obviously we've done a few collabs now, but shout you out. Where can they find you?
Oh, I do the YouTubes and Sha_IRL, and I also stream on Twitch, the same handle. So yeah, you can find me there.
The only mistake I made, by the way, at the end of this episode is that I logged out because I was too AFK in the city, and now I'm showing people my characters, and I'm showing you how many I have, which is cool, but also I flashed them, and some of my transmogs aren't set, and I just want to point out that most of these characters don't have current updated transmogs, and that I just need to defend my honor real quick.
Oh no. Okay.
Yeah, just let
Defended.
people know. Yep. All right, cool. Thank you, Shaw, for
All
your
right.
time.
Thanks for having me.
Bye.